Ever get that feeling, when you're talking to customer service and you're trying to explain something and you really hope they get it? It's like that connection, or if it's not there, it just makes a huge difference.
Oh, absolutely.
We all know how that feels.
Mm.
Well, get this. For today's deep dive, we're going deep into a bunch of material all about English for customer service.
Nice.
Yeah, it's like having a cheat sheet for how to make those interactions actually work.
That's a really good way to put it, actually. What I found really interesting about all this material is that it's not just about, being polite. It goes so much deeper. It gets into how to communicate clearly, like the mechanics of it, across all these different platforms.
Right.
So we're talking phone calls, emails, even face-to-face. And even better, we get into how to deal with those tricky customers, the ones.
Oh, yeah.
How to master phone and email support. And this is a good one, how to offer more value, like through upselling and cross-selling, but do it strategically.
Exactly. So if you're listening to this, think of it as a fast track to learning the essential skills.
Yeah.
Whether you already work with customers, are thinking about it, or just want to be a better customer yourself, honestly, this deep dive is packed with stuff you can actually use. We're talking those aha moments where you're like, oh, that's why that works.
It's true.
So our goal is simple. We're going to pull out the most important knowledge and practical techniques from all of this material so you can communicate better, more professionally, no matter what customer service situation you find yourself in.
Love it.
So where should we start with all of this?
Well, I think the most logical place to begin is with the foundation of it all. Communication.
Right, effective communication. It's the core, right?
It really is. And the source material really hammers this home. Clear and empathetic communication, it's not just a nice to have, it's the bedrock. Phone call, email, face-to-face, it doesn't matter. Your ability to communicate effectively, that's what drives customer satisfaction, and if they stick around.
It's true. And they emphasize active listening as a cornerstone, which I think is so important. It's more than just hearing the words, right?
Oh, for sure.
You've got to be totally focused, like nodding if you're face-to-face, saying things like, I understand on the phone, and not interrupting. Why is this so important? Why does that level of attention make such a difference?
It's simple. When you actively listen, you can actually figure out what the customer needs. And just as important, it makes them feel like they matter.
Right.
When someone feels heard and understood, it can really de-escalate things, And the material highlights that, letting them say everything they need to say before you jump in, that's key.
I see.
There was this study they cited. It found that even quick interruptions can make a customer feel like they're not being heard by, get this, over 50%.
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah.
So once the customer has had their say, the next step seems really basic, but it's summarizing. Just saying back what you heard to make sure you got it right. Like to give this example. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're having a problem with your recent order, and you want to know what's happening with your refund. Is that about right?
Exactly.
Why is that seemingly small step so important?
It's a check,
Yeah.
It makes sure that both of you and the customer, are on the same page. That way you avoid misunderstandings later, and it tells the customer that you were really listening and that you want to address their specific issue.
That makes a lot of sense. So then when you respond, the advice is to be super clear and concise. No jargon, no overly technical language.
Exactly.
If the issue is complex, you got to break it down. They even suggest using analogies or examples that people can relate to.
That's a good strategy.
It's all about getting to the answer without all the fluff.
Right. The goal is to be clear, not to impress them with how much you know.
Right.
Using simple language means the customer understands and they don't feel confused or overwhelmed. It's like, think about explaining a recipe to someone, a complicated one. You wouldn't start throwing around fancy cooking terms, would you?
Right.
No, you'd break it down step by step.
And tone. We can't forget about tone.
Oh, so important.
Even if the customer's getting worked up, you stay calm and you use positive language like, I'm happy to help, or let's figure out the best solution for you. What kind of language should we definitely avoid?
Anything negative, and definitely don't blame them.
Right.
Even if it's not your fault, focusing on solutions and staying positive builds trust and helps everyone work together. Instead of saying, you should have, try something like, let's see what we can do to fix this.
Right. Okay, so avoid the blame game. Now, empathy. This is a big one. Really putting yourself in their shoes. Recognizing how they feel. Saying things like, I understand how frustrating this must be. I'm sorry you're going through this. It seems straightforward, but how much of a difference does it make?
Empathy is massive, honestly. It tells the customer that you get them, that you see them as a person, not just a problem to be solved. And that can really help bring things down a notch, especially if they're upset. And it builds better connection. It's like saying, I get it, and I'm here to help.
Right. I like that. Now, the material also talks about nonverbal cues. So obviously face-to-face, things like posture, eye contact, smiling matter.
Of course.
But even on the phone, they mention how important your tone of voice is.
Oh, yeah.
It all adds up to showing that you care and are engaged.
Absolutely. Even though you can't see them on the phone, your tone tells them a lot. Being warm, attentive, it can build rapport and trust. Even without the visuals. Think about it, you can often tell when someone's smiling just by how they sound, right?
Right, totally. They also bring up this really interesting point about continuous improvement.
Yeah.
They suggest recording interactions, if you can, and asking for feedback. It's kind of like watching game footage to get better, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. When you want to get better at anything, looking back and getting feedback is so valuable.
Right.
And communication is no different.
Right.
Figuring out what you can do better helps you get more effective over time.
Absolutely. And in our world today, where everyone's connected, cultural sensitivity is super important. You got to be aware that different cultures have different ways of communicating.
Right.
Some are more direct, some are more indirect. It's about adapting how you communicate so you connect with everyone, no matter their background.
It shows respect, you know, and that you care about giving everyone the same great service.
Absolutely. Then there's the practical stuff, like setting clear expectations. If someone's going to take time to resolve, you got to be upfront about it. Explain how it works and give them a realistic timeline.
That makes sense.
Being transparent builds trust and prevents people from getting even more frustrated.
Transparency is so key for managing what the customer expects.
Right.
Keeping them in the loop about the process and the time frame shows that you respect their time and you're working on it.
Right. And to wrap it all up, ending on a positive note. Thank the customer for their patience or for their business. Offer to help with anything else. That final impression can really stick with someone.
It can, for sure.
Right.
A positive ending makes them feel good about the whole experience.
Yep.
It encourages them to come back if they need something else. You're building a relationship,
Okay, so we've covered the basics of good communication. But let's be real, sometimes you get those customers who are, well, a little less than happy. Our sources dig into how to handle those tough customers with grace and professionalism. It's not always easy, so what are the main things to remember?
Well, first off, you got to remember that dealing with difficult customers, that's just part of the job.
Yeah, it comes with the territory.
Exactly. The first thing, and we touched on this before, is to stay calm. Don't take it personally.
Right.
Their anger is usually directed at the situation, not at you specifically. You staying calm, that can actually de-escalate things.
Absolutely. And when a customer is upset, active listening becomes even more important. Letting them vent, showing empathy with those verbal cues. It's about making them feel heard, even if you can't give them what they want right away.
Totally. Letting them express themselves without interrupting is so important. It helps you understand why they're upset.
I see.
Empathy, it validates their emotions and sets the stage for finding a solution.
Now, it's natural to want to argue or defend your company,
Right.
but the sources say don't do it.
Resist the urge.
Instead, focus on finding solutions and sincerely apologizing for the trouble they've had, even if you don't think it's the company's fault. That might seem counterintuitive, but why does that work so well?
Apologizing, even if it wasn't your bad, it acknowledges that they had a bad experience, and that can really take the edge off.
Okay.
When you switch to problem-solving mode, it shows that you're committed to fixing things instead of getting into an argument that's not going to go anywhere.
Right, so you've listened, you've empathized, you've apologized. Now what?
Now you own it. Take responsibility and work towards a solution.
Okay.
Tell them what you're going to do, give them a realistic timeline, and, this is important, don't overpromise.
Gotcha.
Taking ownership shows that you're accountable and that you can be trusted.
Right.
Being clear about the steps in the timeline keeps the customer in the loop, and it reassures them that you're on it. If you promise too much and don't deliver, that just makes them more frustrated and they won't trust you.
That makes a lot of sense. But what if the customer's demands are unreasonable or against company policy? How do you deal with that?
It's tricky, but the key is to explain the limitations politely and clearly.
Right.
But at the same time, offer alternatives that you can do that fit within the rules. It's about finding a compromise, showing them you're willing to help within the boundaries of what's possible.
And sometimes, no matter how hard you try, you need to bring someone else in. When's the right time to escalate an issue, and how do you make that handoff smooth?
Escalation is the right move when you've tried everything you can, or if the problem needs someone with more authority to handle it. The material emphasizes making this transition seamless.
Okay.
So you explain clearly why you're transferring them, give them the name and contact info of the person they'll be talking to, and ideally, give that person a quick rundown of what's going on.
So no one feels like they're just getting passed around.
Exactly.
Throughout these tough conversations, the sources keep saying how important it is to stay positive and keep your body language professional,
Oh, yeah.
even when things get heated. It's about showing confidence
Yeah.
and that you really want to help.
Your body language, even something as small as your tone of voice on the phone or how you're standing if you're face-to-face, it can really change how your message comes across.
Right.
Especially when emotions are running high. If you come across as calm and helpful, it can reassure the customer that you're there for them.
Totally. And one more thing, following up.
Oh, that's huge.
After the issue is resolved, you check in with the customer to make sure they're happy. That little extra effort can turn a bad experience into an example of great service.
It really can. Following up shows that you care about their satisfaction, not just solving the immediate problem. It leaves a good impression, one that lasts.
So to sum it up, handling tough customers well, it all comes down to empathy, patience, and really, really good communication skills.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, let's zero in on a specific channel of communication. Phone support. Our sources highlight this as a direct and often make-or-break interaction.
Definitely.
What are the essentials for delivering excellent phone support in English?
They talk a lot about how phone support is all about showing empathy and professionalism, but you don't have the benefit of actually seeing the person.
Right, no visual cues.
Right. It all starts with a prompt and professional greeting. Answer quickly, sound warm and friendly, and state your name and the company's name clearly. That first impression, it sets the tone for the whole conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And clear communication on the phone. It's super important. They suggest speaking at a moderate pace, pronouncing your words clearly, and again, avoiding any technical jargon.
For sure.
It's all about making it easy for them to understand what you're saying.
Exactly. You can't see their face to know if they're getting it.
Right, right.
So being clear in how you speak is even more important.
Active listening is still essential, but with a focus on verbal cues.
Definitely.
They recommend using phrases like, I see, I understand, and please go on to show you're paying attention.
Those little phrases are so important. They take the place of those visual cues you get face-to-face, so the customer knows you're with them.
And empathy on the phone, it often comes down to phrases like, I'm sorry to hear you're experiencing that. You're using your words to acknowledge their frustration, even though you can't see their reaction.
It's true.
Right.
And using your tone of voice and choosing the right words, it builds a connection even though you're not physically there.
Absolutely. Now, when you're giving instructions or explaining how to solve something on the phone, the advice is to break it down into smaller, manageable steps.
Right.
And offer to walk them through it.
For sure.
And it's also important to tell them if you need to put them on hold and give them a rough idea of how long it'll be.
Clarity and managing their expectations, that's so important when you're giving solutions over the phone. Guiding them step by step makes sure they can actually do what you're telling them.
I see.
And keeping them informed about holds and wait times shows that you respect their time and it makes them less anxious.
That makes sense. And that positive and helpful tone, we talked about it before, it's just as important on the phone as anywhere else.
Absolutely. How you sound can really affect how the customer sees you and the whole company.
What about transferring calls? How do you make that a good experience for the customer?
They stress that you need to tell them why you're transferring them, give them the name and contact info of the person they'll be talking to, and if possible, stay on the line until they're connected. It's all about making the transition smooth so they don't feel like they're getting the runaround.
Follow-up seems especially important after a phone call.
It is.
They suggest actually calling back or sending a follow-up email that summarizes the conversation and outlines the next steps. Why is that so crucial after a phone interaction?
Well, when you talk on the phone, there's no written record, right?
Right.
So a follow-up email, it becomes that record.
Oh, that makes sense.
It shows that you're really committed to taking care of their issue, and it gives them something to refer back to.
Gotcha. So when you get a difficult caller on the phone, do the same principles apply as when you're dealing with them in person? Staying calm, using those de-escalation techniques.
Yep, the basics are the same. But since you can't see them, your tone of voice becomes even more important for bringing things down.
Right.
Projecting calm and empathy through your voice is key.
And that idea of continuous improvement, they suggest recording calls, again, if it's okay to do so, to review your phone manner.
It's so helpful.
You can analyze how you sound on the phone and pinpoint areas to work on.
When you listen to those recordings, you can really judge how you're doing, how clear you are, how well you handle different situations. It helps you pinpoint what to work on.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And cultural sensitivity, it matters on the phone too, just like with other forms of communication.
Absolutely. Even though you can't see them, you got to be mindful of those differences in communication styles and preferences.
Right.
It helps you keep things clear and respectful.
Okay, so phone support has its own set of guidelines. Now let's talk about written communication. Emails.
Okay.
Our sources emphasize how important emails are for keeping records and for more detailed communication. What are the key parts of an effective customer service email in English?
They talk a lot about structure and clarity in emails.
Right.
It starts with the subject line. It needs to be clear, short, and accurately reflect what the email is about.
Right.
Ideally, include a reference number like an order ID or something.
Right.
This helps the customer see what it's about right away.
And a personalized greeting, that's a must.
Oh, definitely. Using the customer's name makes it feel less like a form letter and more like you're talking directly to them.
Right.
It shows respect and makes it more personal so they feel valued.
Okay. So then, in the first part of your email, you acknowledge their question or issue.
Yep. Like, thank you for reaching out about, or something like that. It shows that you got their message, you understand it, and you're ready to help.
Now, in the main part of the email, clear and concise explanations are key.
Oh, yeah.
They even suggest using bullet points or numbered lists to make things easier to read. Again, no technical jargon.
Right. When you write, you have more space to explain things than on a call, but you still need to be organized and easy to understand. Bullet points and lists help a lot with that.
Empathy in writing, that's tricky. It's about choosing your words carefully.
Definitely.
Phrases like, I understand how frustrating this must be, can really go a long way.
It shows that you get how they feel, even though you're not there in person. It builds that rapport and shows that you care.
What about when you have bad news to deliver in an email? That can be tough.
It can.
They suggest doing it empathetically, offering alternatives and outlining the next steps.
Exactly. When you're giving bad news in writing, you got to be straight up, but you also got to be kind.
Yeah.
Giving them context, outlining options if there are any, or telling them what you're doing to fix it, it softens the blow and shows that you're working on it.
They really stress the importance of proofreading every single email before hitting send.
Oh, for sure.
Typos and grammar mistakes look really unprofessional.
Proofreading is non-negotiable. It's about credibility, making sure your message is clear and accurate. A well-written email, it shows that you're professional and pay attention to detail.
And just like with phone calls, emails need a polite and professional closing.
Definitely.
Thank the customer, offer help if they need it, and include your contact info.
A good closing leaves a good impression. It also encourages them to get in touch again if they have more questions.
Right, and follow-up emails are important too.
Oh, yeah.
You want to confirm that the issue was resolved and that the customer is happy.
Right. A follow-up email is like putting it in writing that it's taken care of. It also gives the customer a chance to reach back out if there's still something wrong.
Now, if you need to escalate an issue in an email, what's the best way to do it?
They say to be clear about why you're escalating it
Okay.
and give them the contact details of the person who will be handling it from there.
Right, so the transition is smooth and the customer knows what's going on.
Exactly.
And cultural sensitivity is something to keep in mind with emails too.
Always. How you write, the words you use, your style, it all needs to be adjusted for different cultures.
It's about avoiding those misunderstandings.
It is.
Continuous improvement is important for emails too, right?
It applies to everything.
You should be regularly looking at your sent emails and finding ways to be clearer, more concise, and more effective.
Reviewing what you've written and asking for feedback can really help you improve your writing over time.
And when you're dealing with an upset customer in an email, the key is to stay professional and empathetic. just like in person or on the phone.
Absolutely. Keep your cool, show that you care, and watch your language. Don't be defensive or start arguing.
Okay, we've covered the fundamentals of good communication across different channels.
We have.
Now let's get into something that can make both the customer and the business happier: upselling and cross-selling.
All right.
Our sources describe these as strategic tools.
So they are.
What's the main idea behind them?
Well, with upselling, you're encouraging the customer to buy a pricier or upgraded version of what they're already looking at.
Right.
And cross-selling is suggesting other products or services that go well with what they're buying, to enhance it.
Right.
The goal is to give the customer more value and meet their needs in a more complete way.
And the foundation for doing this well goes back to what we talked about before: active listening and understanding the customer's needs.
Couldn't agree more.
You want to find opportunities to offer suggestions that actually make sense based on what they've already shown interest in.
It's all about tailoring it to them. You listen to what they're asking, you look at what they've bought before, and then you can make suggestions that add real value, not just a generic sales pitch.
Right. And the key is to focus on the benefits, right? How these extra products or services will solve a problem for the customer or make them happier. They use the example of a laptop case, one that gives extra protection for a new laptop.
Yeah, you gotta highlight what makes it good for them, what value it adds. It's not about just pushing more stuff. It's about offering solutions that really address their needs and make them feel good about their purchase.
They also talk about asking open-ended questions.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Things like, what other accessories are you thinking about?
Mm-hmm.
Or how are you planning to use this? It helps you figure out what they need and make better recommendations.
Exactly. Open-ended questions encourage them to tell you more, and then you can use that info to suggest things that are actually relevant and helpful.
Timing seems to be important too. You don't want to overwhelm them with offers right off the bat.
Oh, definitely not.
You wait for a natural moment in the conversation.
Right.
Like suggesting an extended warranty after they've already decided to buy the laptop. That makes sense.
Yeah, when you bring up upselling or cross-selling at the right time, it feels more like you're being helpful, not pushy.
Mm-hmm.
It should just flow naturally from what you're already talking about.
And they really emphasize putting the customer first and not being too pushy.
Absolutely.
You got to respect their decision if they say no.
That's how you build trust. Having a good relationship with the customer, that's way more important than making a sale right then and there. If you respect their choice, they're more likely to listen to you next time.
And they mention training and practice.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Role-playing different scenarios can help you get better at upselling and cross-selling.
Practice makes perfect, right?
Right.
It helps you get comfortable with the techniques and sound more natural and confident, which makes you more effective.
And cultural sensitivity, believe it or not, even comes into play with upselling and cross-selling.
It's everywhere. What might be a normal suggestion in one culture might come across as too aggressive in another.
That's a good point. And just like with everything else in customer service, you've got to keep getting better at upselling and cross-selling.
For sure.
Analyze what works, what doesn't, and you'll become more effective over time.
You look back at how you did, you ask for feedback, and you use that to improve how you do things. It's all about meeting those customer needs and hitting those business goals.
So it sounds like when upselling and cross-selling are done thoughtfully,
Yeah.
with the customer in mind, it's not just about making more sales.
No, it's not.
It's about giving the customer more value and solutions and ultimately a better experience.
Exactly. When you do it right, with the customer's best interest at heart, they end up feeling good.
Yeah.
They feel like they got a complete solution, and they're more likely to stick around as a customer.
So we've really covered a lot in this deep dive into English for customer service. We've seen how important clear communication and empathy are for every interaction, whether it's a phone call, an email, or face-to-face.
We really have.
We've talked about the skills you need to handle those tough customers, how to be great on the phone and in emails, and how to strategically offer more value through upselling and cross-selling.
And what's really cool is how it all ties together. Your communication skills directly impact how well you deal with difficult customers, how good your phone and email support is, and even how you find those opportunities to offer more value.
It all boils down to understanding what the customer needs and addressing those needs effectively.
Absolutely.
So for everyone listening, I have a little challenge for you. In your next interaction with customer service, whether you're the one helping or the one being helped, try to use just one or two of the things we've talked about today.
Right.
Maybe really focus on actively listening, or try to write an email that shows you really understand how the other person feels. It could make a bigger difference than you think.
And it makes me think, for those listening, think about a time when you were the customer and the person helping you said or did something small, maybe a phrase they used or how they listened, that really changed how you felt about that whole company.
Oh, yeah.
If you think about those little things, it can really show you how powerful these skills can be.
Exactly. And remember, this deep dive is just the beginning.
It is.
The world of customer service is always changing, and it's super important to keep learning. So keep exploring, keep practicing, and keep improving those communication skills.
In the end, getting better at customer service is about connecting with people, making those interactions positive, and building relationships that last. It's something that benefits everyone.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found it useful and that you feel more confident. Until next time,
See you then.
bye.